On this episode of Bones and Stones, we have a familiar face. Nic is back. You may remember he was with us the other day to talk about two things: historical archaeology and his work, as well as being a postdoc. And we never got onto that second topic because we just got so wrapped up in the first part of the conversation. So Nic's joined us again to talk specifically about being a postdoc. All four of us have been postdocs. Lotta's still a postdoc, Nic's a postdoc, so we've got a bit of experience between us. So to kick things off, Nic, why don't you give us a quick introduction to what a postdoc actually is?
So it's, sure, thanks for having me again, guys. So a postdoc is a time period after you've completed your PhD, you apply for it, you're given funding, you're given a space at an institution, and it's a time in which to grow your career. So you're able to work on your PhD research, you're able to expand on that, you're able to publish papers, you're able to do other academic activities, go to workshops and conferences, give presentations, kind of expand your brand, if you want to put it that way, and bury yourself deeper in your niche or where you're comfortable with the way your research is situated. And then also kind of being part of an academic department more completely. So you're teaching, you're supervising students, you're working kind of within the faculty team. So it's all these things with, I think, like a bit of space to kind of, find your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really nice opportunity. Like you point out, I think this is the big benefit, is to start to publish and start to build up that publication record behind you. And one of the great things about a postdoc, and obviously postdocs become really important when you're going into an academic environment. So one of the great things about it is that you start, at least what my experience, you start to reap the benefits of a very long a period of hard work. It's undergrad, honors, masters, PhD. And then for the postdocs, the first time you really get to take all of those skills and start to apply it in your own way, using your own abilities in your own research areas or expanding into new research areas. And like you say, the one nice thing is you start to become part of that staff environment as well, to an extent, which is actually, it's quite a nice transition to make.
Tim, if I could maybe just jump in there as well. So another important thing with a postdoc, or at least what I found from my experiences, is that you do work in conjunction with a host as well. So although you will be hosted at a university, you will have a research host who will essentially, not be part of your postdoc necessarily, but may perhaps guide you along with your research. But another thing that I wanted to bring up, and I don't know what your guys' experience has been in terms of defining what a postdoc is your role at the university, and whether as a postdoc you are a student or whether you are staff. And this is something that is a bit strange. I think it differs depending on the university that you're at. I've done a short postdoc at Wits. I was at Tuks for a few years, and now obviously I'm at UJ, and the situation has been quite different at all of the different universities.
Yeah, I mean, I had 2 years at Tuks, and then I had a year at Wits. And also my postdoc was through the NRF, through the Scarce Skills Innovation Fund. So that was also a freestanding postdoc. So it was me bringing the money in. And I think that also plays a role. There's a difference when it's you coming with freestanding money versus the university awarding you a postdoc that they're paying for. And so I think that makes, and the roles are different. But the thing is, so like for me at least, I was exposed to a lot of things, but I could choose to do it or not. So for example, lecturing, and supervision as well. I chose to do those things because I wanted to move eventually into a lecturing position. So I wanted to build up that experience, which is another great thing you could do as a postdoc. Get lecturing experience, get supervision, get curriculum planning experience, So at Tukkies at least, and Wits, it was very much, what would I like to participate in? And had the money come from the universities, maybe it would have been a bit different. Kara, I think you're still on mute.
Sorry. So I've had a bit of a different experience because my postdocs were always, the first 2 were always supported by somebody. And so I did have a bit more of a narrow focus. I was brought onto projects to do specific things. And while, the hosts were gracious enough to sort of let me do my own particular research, coming on to somebody else's sort of postdoc grant that's written specifically for a project does provide some limitations. However, generally people are very willing to let postdocs sort of publish their PhD like you say, supervise or become involved in supervision as well as teaching courses. And I have found that experience during postdoc was invaluable towards teaching or developing my teaching, that I'm doing now, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, that's that point you said there, Matt, between, and Tim said too, between being hosted and bringing the money in, was also a kind of a strange, it kind of puts you in a strange position. And to go back to what Matt Lotta said about how you're in this weird betwixt and between, you're in a very liminal space. And I think that's the kind of the hard part of the postdoc. So we spoke a bit about the benefits, and if I can kind of bring in some of the difficulties, was being that in between. So, my experience, I've just completed 2 years at UCT. I was part of a larger project. And on the one hand, I was quote unquote kind of constrained by that, in the sense that I had to focus my abilities on what the project aims were, and I kind of had to find time elsewhere to do my own thing or to expand on my PhD. And if I could kind of go back in time, I probably could have managed that a lot better. But it's that student, are you a student? Are you a staff thing is strange. And I think that's what causes a lot of people who are doing postdocs and get disheartened. I think that it comes down to, a lot of that. And I think we all know a lot of people who did postdocs, or, I know at least 2 who left halfway through their postdocs, didn't complete them. So that's one of the, I think, the difficulties. It's in betweenness, and you've got to be your own boss, I think, in a lot of ways. And in my case, I didn't have someone over my shoulder telling me what to do, which is a change from your PhD, really. There wasn't a real strict deadline. There wasn't an overarching focus that you had to kind of reach at the end of the time period.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think even at a master's PhD level, and actually at honors too, is depending on your supervisor as well and their approach, not having someone guiding you constantly, not having someone working with what you're dealing with and assisting you along and managing your progress, it really does boil down to you as well. And if you want your postdoc to be successful, you can't just, sit in an office, have a cup of coffee, keep everyone happy by telling jokes, be, the good guy who buys the first round of beers every time you go to the pub. Like, that's great, do all of that. But I mean, you really have to, you're under pressure, you have to publish, that's a big thing, And so if you want to transition from the postdoc and into that, staff environment, it's crucial that you make the best of the postdoc. So it's definitely not like, yeah, great, you finish your PhD, you can take your foot off the gas in a weird way, but at the same time, you're just putting the other foot on another gas pedal, and you've got to head off in another direction kind of thing, because it doesn't get easier at all. But that's the joy of it. That's the fun behind all of this too.
Yeah. I think, in my experience too, the postdoc was a really important period in training me how to deal with the pressure of an academic world. So many PhD students get wrapped up in the sort of project that they're in, but that's one project. And yes, you're attached to it for so long, for 3 years of your life, maybe longer than that, sometimes up to 10 years. And it's really, quite a stressful and emotional thing. But in the academic world, once you sort of move beyond the postdoc and now you're, a lecturer, you might be managing 4 or 5 different projects on top of students, on top of teaching responsibilities, on top of administration. And so the postdoc is sort of a venture into that, where you start getting your feet wet with becoming involved in maybe 2 or 3 projects and learning, how do I manage 2 projects that are concurrent, that are going on simultaneously. How do I manage and divide my time? And it only just becomes sort of more increasing pressure as you get into a sort of more permanent position, and you're now then expected to supervise students, teach, and so on and so forth. So, it really is a nice sort of foray into the academic world in that sense, because PhDs are stressful, but, becoming a sort of full-time academic and employee through a contract or whatever it might be, then that level of stress does ramp up quite a bit.
100%, yeah.
Kara, just to touch on something you said, I think Tim and Nick mentioned it as well, just about coming into a university with funding. And then I just want to relate that back to what a postdoc position is. Let's not forget, it is a research position. The point of a postdoctoral position is to get your research out there and to publish. Now, if you come into the university with funding, at least what I've found is that there are very different publishing requirements and output requirements when you come into the university with funds, versus if you are at the institution and you are being hosted there, there will be certain KPIs or output requirements that you will need to make every single year in order to get your second, third year of postdoctoral funding. So that's something to consider as well. It's not only about juggling different projects, Kara, as you've mentioned. It's also very important about making sure that you are getting the necessary published units per year.
Yeah, the publication thing is but it's interesting you should say that, Matt, and I think we've spoken about this before, because my experience at UCT, I didn't have that pressure. I had no one writing me about KPIs, about publications. It was more kind of being part of the team. It was kind of being an active member of the department. That seemed to be more kind of the weight or the pressure that was felt, and to actually actively kind of contribute. Well, you know, in my case, I think what I'm trying to get at is that it seems to be different depending on the project, depending on how your funding works, depending on what the institution wants from you. So that's something to think about in terms of the role that's there. But I think ultimately it comes down to what you both said, that you are expected to do to research, to publish that research, and to make. I always see it as make yourself known. It's almost like you are publicizing yourself in every sphere, in your research, in teaching, in your department, at other universities, internationally. You're making connections with other institutions through that you've met or who are in similar fields. Also, I think a big thing that we've got to think about too is that I know in my case that having completed the PhD, a few months after that, getting the postdoc gave me a lot of confidence. And having the qualification of the PhD, I had the confidence to now say, hey, I actually know something about this. I can now engage with this person at this university, or, you know, a peer or someone who's published 1,000 articles. I can say, well, I actually know what I'm talking about here. I can actually talk to them. And, you know, confidently.
That's a really good point. I think as usual, we could carry on talking about this for quite a long time. Between the four of us, there's some really different experiences, and I'm sure every postdoc has other experiences as well. But hopefully this gives people a little bit of an insight into some of the experiences you're going to face as a postdoc, some of the challenges, and also maybe what you need to focus on achieving too, you know. But thanks very much, Nic, for joining us again. Appreciate it. Kara, I know you had to deal with the parenting during lockdown, okay, but we appreciate you hanging in there.
My apologies. I had a crying daughter I had to attend to quickly.
Things you got to do, you know, yeah. But thanks, guys. Thanks for the chat. And we'll speak soon again.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.